happens when you have your first fight? What
When
happens
you
when you
break
have
up.
your first fight? He's livid at you, and all he's going to do is look at you and say, go to work.
Oh, well, relationship over, my friend.
They do it.
Welcome back to Muse on the Mic. I'm Riley.
And I'm Emily. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Muse on the Mic. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're always trying to grow the channel. Share it with your friends. Join us on social media. You can find all of those in the caption below. Riley, what are we doing today?
We're jumping into another Twitter post. We're talking about in a relationship as a sex worker, when do you introduce this topic? When do you tell them what you do for a living? So I'm going to start by reading a post by, or from, I should say, Maya Moon. And she says, in my civvy life, I generally share about my work right away. I figure they're either going to be supportive of who I am or they're not worth my time. Curious about how others approach this and why.
Mm, juicy,
I
juicy. I know we both kind of have our own experiences with this in some regards, as well as we can reflect a bit on some of our staff and what they've kind of encountered over the years. Um, I am usually of mine to just tell people right out the hop. And part
Mhm.
of it is a little bit aggressive and a little alpha in my way of being like, well, I'm just gonna put it all out there. And then
Mhm.
if they don't, no, 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 no. And I've learned in hindsight that's maybe not the best approach. However, I don't ever want to live my life in a position where I have to lie.
For
So
sure.
I'm not going to make a big dramatic story to conceal it. I mean, take one peek at my social media. There it is. It's not hard to find out what I do. But like when you do meet someone who, let's say, is, you haven't added each other on Facebook or Instagram yet, and you're in that kind of a circumstance, I do think that in the next phase of my life, if I feel like entering the dating world again, which I've been peacefully and happily away from for a little while, um, I think I'd go about it without such an aggressive approach. But I would still definitely want them to know the beginning. That doesn't have to be, I want to remind myself, Emily, that doesn't mean it has to be in the first 10 minutes. It doesn't mean it has to be in the very first date. You can wait 10 minutes in to date three and then say, oh, by the way.
Right.
However, first dates are full of questions like, what do you do for a living? It's
Right.
interview questions. And so I don't want to say, oh, I own a spicy something. I don't want to be like, oh, I work in the adult industry. Like there are no perfect words. There's just no
Mhm.
perfect words to use. And so it's trial and error for so many sex workers. And again, because of stigma. What about you?
My thought with you is I agree. I don't think you're making it to date three before the question gets asked of what you do for a living. But I think in your situation or your unique situation, saying you own Muse is going to be talked about fairly close to meeting, but
Yeah,
giving the backstory of how your journey began and the lives you've lived as Emily, I don't think that should be right up front. And I'm torn on
right.
the matter. I think my opinions have changed over time. I think my opinion
Mhm.
has changed with age a little bit. And also the fact that we aren't in the room. So it is a little bit different. And then when I
Mm,
put myself in those shoes, the shoes that our girls are in, I don't know how I feel.
mm.
I definitely would not want to keep up a long-term lie of where I am and no, you can't drop me off flowers to my work or like getting
Right.
caught in lies. It's just not worth it. Like, do you really want to be with someone that you feel is that close-minded? That they wouldn't be accepting. But there's a lot of different challenges at different phases of life and ages of life. And I think we see that with our girls a lot.
I agree. Age definitely plays in. Age and experience. I mean, they go hand in
Mhm.
hand, right?
Yeah.
A little bit of trial and error. You learn the hard ways on what not to do more than what to do.
Mhm.
Because the ones that we do know where it's worked, it's not that they found some magic formula. It was just the right person with the right understanding, and the
Mhm.
conversation went the right way. I don't think there is a guide that any we could offer other sex workers to say, do this and your partner will accept it, or say it like this and I guarantee you that blah 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 will happen
Right.
positively. I don't think there's any way to guess that, and it's always a risk. It's always a risk that the person will reject you, reject the relationship, decide that it's not for them. And they are completely welcome and allowed to do so. It sucks, but they're allowed to completely do so. And vice versa. I'm not a big believer. Um, like, I'd probably be frustrated with both of us if either of us were like, I'm going to go into this new relationship, I'm going to lie my ass off. He can
Right.
never know about Muse. I'd be like, that's crazy talk. Give your head a shake. And, when you wake up with a clear mind, call me in the morning. Like, I'm
Right.
not having this conversation with you. This is bullshit. But with our staff, we deal with it a lot with them. And we have very candid woman to woman conversations. Sometimes they come in already having a partner that knows I'm here applying for a job. Sometimes it's halfway through, the guy finds out. Some of them get dumped. Some of them stay. Some of them staying can cause more problems. Like, his insecurities are going to pop up. He's going to have questions. It's going to be awkward. It's always weird when I see a boyfriend come pick a girl up after her shift or something, and they're all like, "Oh, we all know Frank," and I'm like, "Y'all know Frank?" Like, that's weird. But I'm from a different era. I mean, our
Yeah.
generation is old school, right? Back in my day, you didn't ask a girl her real name, let alone, "Oh, is that your man?" Like,
Right.
see the one that drives a Corolla? Like, you would never ask something like that, because I just realized I said Corolla. It's a very good car. I don't know very much about cars, guys. I don't drive. So with me on that. I hope he doesn't drive a Corolla. No offense. Anyways, is that guy? And then be like, yeah, that's my man. Like, oh, that's the one that you see all over your Facebook. Like, nowadays, they all know each other's names and identities and family trees and everything, because it's all on social media. So, like, how do you hide that? It's harder for girls to hide where they work, because how is it in the past 3 months you've added like 7 new hot girls to your Instagram? None of y'all have a family or boyfriends on these pages. You all have an OnlyFans. Like, what's going on
Yeah.
here? You can out yourself from the things you're trying to hide if you don't go about it right. And so, again, there is no formula for it. It's knowing your partner and having to think it through, or taking the risk when a relationship is new. And that is always nerve-wracking. Newness is so scary with those kind of things. And even if I was like, "Oh, I own this really cool business, blah, blah, blah," and he's like, "That's awesome." And then when do I tell him the rest? Do I wait till Thanksgiving? Like, is it pillow talk? Do I be like, "Just listen to my podcast and you'll catch on quick"? Like,
That's what you should do.
at what point? At what point is the news spilled? Is the tea all over the table? Like, there's only so many ways to go about it. And for me, if a person, I'm with you. I've aged enough. Person doesn't accept me, they can just fuck off. I don't care. Like, it's out of sight, out of mind to me. Um, at the same time, I've learned, don't give it all away. Nobody needs to know all the things. I think it can be very common, especially with dating dynamics these days. People hear, let's say I'm on a first date with you and you tell me you own this business. I don't want the man I'm sitting with to all of a sudden be like, "Ooh, sugar mama,"
Right.
and just jump to that, right? There is a bit of like, when do you tell? How much do you tell? What do you emphasize? What, like, I don't want to overemphasize anything. I don't want to think he's just hit a jackpot beyond my epicness. Like, this is not your new bank account. Like, and yet we know lots of girls that have deadbeat dudes that are in this industry, and a lot of their money goes to that nonsense. Guilty as charged back in the day in my 20s too, right? I learned that lesson a very expensive, hard way as well. And it's shitty. It's really shitty. It's a trend away from a man wanting to be the provider, and instead thinking, "Ooh, I lucked out into an opportunity."
Mhm.
And that's not what girls are here for. That's not what they should be doing with their money. And
Mhm.
so it's hard. It's risky. You never know how it's going to go, or what face someone's going to make, or the look. Reminds me of when we first had to tell our folks and be like, "So guess what?" And I'm waiting for that reaction. I'm like, "What's your face going to do?" And they go, "Oh."
I mean, in the sex work industry, there is girls that do this long term. This is their career. But I think for a big majority of girls, it's short term. It's short term goals. And like you said before, it's very fluid. They may go in and out of the industry. But if a girl is in the industry for very specific reasons with specific goals, my thought is just don't date for those 3 years. Or if you're going to, yeah, be 100% upfront. And if they're out, then they're out. This is what your mission was, and stay true to that. You came for a reason. And unless he's coming in a sugar daddy role, not to take this episode to that level, but like unless he's coming in to help you achieve those goals, then you have to stay focused on what you're doing. And it's weird because even in training, I've spoke to girls about what to tell their boyfriend if they want to, because there's a few that do. And as much as I'm like, oof, the scary topic, and I don't want to promote lying, but at the same time, maybe there's things you don't share, and saying things that, you do give erotic massages, body slides and hand jobs, and you are naked, but do you really need to include that they go down on you? Do we really need to say that you lick balls from time to time? Like, maybe there's certain details that are wise to leave out. Again, when I'm saying this out loud, it kind of feels bad, like I'm training them to lie. I just want to give them options. I really feel like a girl being super successful is done single or with a partner that's extremely supportive of what she's doing.
Oh, hey, welcome back to Just the Tip with Riley. So today we're talking about rough sex. And rough sex does not have to mean kink or BDSM. It's taking your sex life from mild to wild. It's bringing it up to an 11. So let's go. So why have rough sex? It's inherently animalistic. It's visceral. It's primal. It's sex met with resistance. In my opinion, society's become so prim and proper, and really sex is a time in our life that we should tap back into our animalistic side. And let's face it, we are animals. We come with claws, we come with teeth, we are animals. It's grunting, it's groaning, it's aggressive, and depending on your partner's tolerance, it can involve blood, sweat, and tears. So before we jump in, I will remind you, as always, communication, guys. So communicate your boundaries and your intent. So we're going to jump into 3 different aspects of rough sex. We're going to start with choking, go into hair pulling, and end with spanking. So let's go, guys. If this tip isn't enough, subscribe to Patreon for the whole thing.
Supportiveness is so important. It's not just the knowing, it's not just the accepting. It's got to be supportive for it to work. I'm always, again, it's our age and experience that I'm a little bummed when I see a girl change up her whole life plan because of a dude. And it's not to say that he might not be the dude, right? Like, he might be the guy for the rest of your life, but you came in here with a plan. Yeah. And you came in here with certain goals. And so what is the plan then? And often they don't have a plan. They don't even have a backup job. And I'm like, okay, but whatever happened to OSAP? Like, you still have student loans that are due in April. Like, right. Where was that conversation? And they haven't had that conversation with the guy. And I'm like, okay, so why are we making long-term decisions off what is a new and could be temporary circumstance? That's the craziest way to make decisions. I could not imagine making my life choices that way. That's wild. I mean, unless it's like heat of the moment, life or death, you normally think through big decisions, right? And so when boyfriend came and said to you, oh, I want you to stop stripping or whatever he said, the next question should be like, okay, then what supplements that income? Or, okay, how then do I get to my goal quicker? Or I'm determined to buy, my family's, house that my grandfather grew up in so I could keep it in the family, or like whatever your goal is. Like, but what happens to the house? The house just going on the market and someone else going to live in your grandpa's house? Like, what are we doing here? Your kids still need to go to college. Like, what? What happened to all the goals? What happened to the plan? And I agree, unless he's on board and he's participating, in which case, support her so much that her job is easier for her so that she can make the money she needs to make, maybe make it quicker, sooner, with less stress, so she can get out of it sooner. Isn't that a win-win for everybody? I mean, you don't have to love it, but like, there's careers where I couldn't date those. I could not date a cop. First of all, probably be pretty controversial, right? Like, tell me about work. No. No, sir. Not talking about it. But like, I mean, there's a politician, there's certain things that we couldn't mix and match with, right? I don't know if I could work with it or marry a doctor who's on call in ER all the time or works
Mhm.
3 days on and 5 days off. Like there's certain schedules and certain things that I could deal with. I wouldn't want to worry. Um, if I was in a country that had much stronger, I'm thinking Americans, they're military. I don't think I'd be a military wife. I just don't have it in me, right? Like there are certain things where I could reject. And I think he's allowed, a partner is allowed, he or she, I should say, is allowed to reject that as well. But either you're going to be on board with it and choose, okay, I do love this man. He is in the military, or I do love this woman. She is a dancer. And so this is what I'm accepting and getting into. So how can I make it best for her or support him while he's overseas? Or like, what if the challenge is you're either on the same team or you're not? And
Mhm.
pressuring her to just give up her income and her livelihood or her dreams and her goals is just crazy town to me. And it's hard to watch 20 somethings make those kind of decisions when we're 40 something and we know, oh God, here we go again. Like we'll see in 6 months. Like I hate it. And I
But
hate that we're right.
that's the problem is the age difference. Because when you're my thought right now, if I were in the industry, like working in the industry, I 100% would be honest. And if
At
I'm
this
not
age, you
your,
mean?
yes,
Okay.
if I'm not your cup of tea, that's fine. Let's
Right.
move on, right? I would have the comfort to do that. But I think when you're talking about the age group or our biggest kind of age group within our industry, um, it's different because not only are they just putting it out there at the risk of being rejected, but they're
Yeah.
also putting it out there in a very like gossipy online um world where people hang things over your head. People will out you. People will threaten to tell your family. Like it's almost a risk to let people know in some ways. It's not just if they're going to accept you, but what are they going to do with that information when they're pissed off at you? And that we've seen quite often. It's the immaturity level, and that comes with youth.
And stigma yet
Mhm.
again. Because it wouldn't be a dangle, like a carrot to dangle, if there
Mhm.
wasn't stigma, right? If you were like, your daughter's a dentist, like that wouldn't be a thing, right? It's only if you're a stripper or you work in a rub and tug or you're a hooker, or like any of the code words that go along with stigma. That's
Yeah.
the only reason why a boyfriend, a disgruntled ex, any of those kind of situations would be able to hang that over your head altogether. So it is a risk. It's a risk to safety. What if he gets really angry about the situation? What if you wait and you tell him 2 years in and then he's furious? Like there's risks all around. Telling someone right off the hop, they could be like, guys, I was just on this first date and they document it all on TikTok. Like
Mhm.
before you know it, your life, your well being, and your privacy is out the window. It is always a risk for sex workers and always a risk because of stigma. But
Mhm.
you're right. There's the afterthought too. It's not just will he accept it in the conversation. What happens when you have your first fight? What
When
happens
you
when you
break
have
up.
your first fight? He's livid at you, and all he's going to do is look at you and say, go to work.
Oh, well, relationship over, my friend.
They do it. They do it. There's some that like to use it as a card to like one up you or to belittle you and demean you or to keep you kind of just under them enough. And it's so manipulative. It's so like threatening to their well-being. Makes it really difficult for them to come to work and have a right mind, which means they're not making the money they're supposed to be making to accomplish their goals and get out of it anyway. Like
Mhm.
it's the guy going kind of shooting himself in the foot. If you're that uncomfortable with it, ironically, you have to be supportive because it's the quickest path to getting her to whatever makes her happy, which should be his only goal. It
Mhm.
just makes no sense. Hilarious. But yeah,
These
nerve
topics
wracking. As owners, as 40-year-olds, there's no right answer.
No. And that's why these topics are so tricky when we dive into them because I'm like, we have opinions on it, but we have no answers. And there
Right.
is no one answer fits all. And it's Twitter posts like these that at least open up the discussion for sex workers to at least talk to each other and bounce ideas because not everyone's going to accomplish this successfully. And I really don't have any strong advice for you. Like
It's
it's
true.
tricky.
It's literally just, I mean, like most things with love, finding the right person. Because
Mhm.
you could have 8 first dates where you tell the person right off the hop and they're like, whoa, and they get up and leave the table for goodness sake, right? And then you meet that one that's like, oh, really? Tell me about that. That sounds interesting. And they want to at least investigate and know more about it so that they don't come at you with the judgment. I mean, nobody likes being judged. It's a terrible practice of humans, you know? And unless it's for survival methods, there's no reason or call for it. And to put her then in a defensive is not going to make that conversation a win for him, but it's
Mhm.
also not financially going to be the good for her either. Who wants to go to work under that kind of duress? That's terrible. That's
Mhm.
terrible. And then knowing her luck, she'll have a shitty client that day, or some guy go write a shitty review because she wasn't present at the time and blah blah blah. She seemed distracted and yada yada. And meanwhile, some asshole that sleeps on her couch doesn't pay rent and is threatening to tell her mother. Like, there's a lot that goes into it, and it's always a dangerous risk for sex workers, and always comes down to stigma. Imagine how nice it would be. There should be an app just for sex workers where we can just like date people
Ooh,
already in the good side.
interesting.
A stigma-free place to play.
Being a sex worker is not an easy life, guys. As much as
It is
people think
not.
it's easy, there's nothing easy about it.
It's not. It's not. Throw in conflicting feelings. What if you don't like your coworkers? Or what if you're
Mhm.
madly in love secretly with a client? Like, there could be so many other dynamics in the mix that make it just a jumbled mess to try and navigate dating. And it's two polar opposite and yet kind of overlapping worlds because sex, love, intimacy, all of that is part of sex work and dating. And yet, with dual identity, you want to keep it so separate. Those feelings can get really jumbly, and it can be really difficult, especially as a young woman, to navigate. And I love that this sex worker posed the question and opened the conversation. We'll link the tweet in the description so people can read some of the comments and replies because
I
they're
know,
just as enlightening,
yeah.
just as diverse, and yet some of them echo some of the same things that we've just said too. They've had some trial and error this way, trial and error that way. This didn't work. This did work, but now I found my perfect guy. So
Right.
they get there eventually. We all kind of end up with our person eventually, but it can be a slippery, tricky slope to kind of
Mhm.
weave and bob through all those different things that I'm sure most people, they think stripper, they don't think about that.
Yeah. And I'm curious if you guys can participate. Let us know. Would you date a sex worker? How would you feel
Mhm.
about it? But I'm interested to read the comment section on this post because I didn't dive into that yet.
It's interesting, but I agree. I'd love to hear from other people. And
Mhm.
if you're a viewer and you're watching right now and you were told on a first date, how would you want to be told? Like, how
Mhm.
would you want that to be delivered? Would you want it to just be like cold hard facts, blunt, fast, furious, rip the band-aid? Would you want to
Yeah.
be gracefully and gently told? Would you be like, I don't want to know for at least 6 months? Like, I'm curious from the guy's side of it too. Like, how
Mhm.
would they like to receive news like that? And there's no way to preemptively ask that question either.
Oh, it's
Like,
true.
there's no way to do that. So, anyways, I thought it was an interesting little tweet, and I'm glad
Mhm.
we chatted about it because I think it's kind of cool. I think it's kind of one of, again, the subjects not talked about, not easy to navigate,
Yeah,
and we're always looking for advice that we can pass on to our workers and others too. So, drop down in the comments, let us know what y'all think.
absolutely.
Awesome. That was a good one. I think that wraps up this episode, and we'll see you on the next episode of Muse on the Mic. Bye,
Bye.
guys.